My name's Beck, and I'm responsible for our workplace consulting team at CBRE. And so I'm an architect, and my job is to essentially advise corporate occupiers on how they get the most from their working environment. So to be honest with you, at this conference, I feel like a little bit of a fish out of water. So to kind of ease me into it and to break the ice, I thought I'd start by telling a joke. So this could go really badly, but we'll give it a go. So it starts with a tragic accident. So a real estate broker is run over by a bus. So he goes up to heaven and he meets St. Peter at the gate to heaven. And St. Peter says, well, we don't often get many of you guys, so I'm not quite sure what to do with you. So he said, well, I've got an idea. Why don't you have a day in hell and a day in heaven, and then at the end, you can decide what works for you, what's best. So the real estate broker thinks, okay, I'll give it a go. So gets in the elevator, goes down to hell. The doors open, and there's this wonderful green meadow, and there's ex-colleagues and friends, well-dressed, sipping martinis. And it says, wow, this isn't bad, actually. So he goes in and spends the day playing golf and catching up with old friends. So at the end of the first day, gets back in the elevator, goes up to heaven, and gets up there, and it's what you'd expect to see. He spends the day on a cloud, playing a harp and singing. So very relaxing day. So at the end of the second day, St. Peter says, so what do you prefer? What are you going to choose? And he says, well, I actually quite like hell. So gets back in the elevator, goes down to hell, and of course the doors open, and there's this desolate landscape. And everybody that was there previously is now in rags. And he says, well, this isn't what I expected to see. This wasn't what I saw yesterday. And St. Peter says, well, yesterday we were recruiting you. Today you're staff. So apart from easing me into my presentation, there's probably quite a poignant point there as well, which is about we need to put just as much effort into attracting great talent as we do in retaining great talent. And I suppose for me in my role, that's about helping corporate occupiers to create great environments and great experiences for employees. And that's not just about helter-skelters, and it's not just about free food. It's also about getting the basics right. So, but more on that in a minute on our research. So to start, I wanted to share a kind of fundamental question that is asked in my industry, which is, shouldn't real estate be more about people than buildings? And over the years, we spent a lot of time trying to correlate the impact of the physical environment on how people perform at work. So the generally accepted rule is that we use satisfaction. So we measure satisfaction before we make a change to the working environment, and then we measure satisfaction after we make that change. And any increase in satisfaction links to an impact on productivity, right? Because happier people are more productive people. But of course, workplace satisfaction is much more complex than that. And it's impacted by a range of different factors, like, for example, how satisfied you are with your job, whether you like your boss or not, how good your commute to work is. So all these things can impact it. So I think fundamentally we need to be thinking about how we find a better way to do this. So my presentation today is going to be about the built environment, but it's also going to be about people and how we can look for ways to quantify, if you like, the impact on performance through changes we make in the built environment. So let's start with why wellness is so important, and I'm sure you guys will be aware of some of the statistics I'm about to share with you. So this was a survey that was conducted by Forbes, 600 organizations, and 50% of the respondents attributed half of their turnover to burnout. So from the perspective of the economy, that 12.5 million days actually accounts for half of the total days lost for all workplace injury and workplace illness. So it's having a huge impact. And if you put that into perspective of the number of employees in the UK economy, that's half a day for everybody in work for every year. So it has a huge impact. And in terms of the next generation, we're starting to see a reprioritization in the workplace. So this is a survey that CBRE ourselves have conducted recently, but 70% of millennials see workplace quality as an important factor in choosing an employer. And likewise, 69% would choose a better working environment over other benefits. So obviously, poor health is... sorry, I didn't know that one was coming in, actually. I thought that one's thrown me slightly. So obviously, poor health is having a big impact on people's performance at work and how businesses perform as well. But how can we target investments to make workplace wellness, to make sure we're getting to the greatest good, we're delivering the greatest good for the organisation? How can we measure a return on investment? And coming back to my previous question, how can we measure the link between people performance and the working environment? So, for me, the answer lies in cycling. So this is Sir David Brailsford. Some of you may know the story about Sky Cycling and British cycling, so bear with me if you do. So before he took over British cycling in 2003, we had 75 years of nothing. No Olympic medals, no Grand Tour wins. So, but since he's took over, we've now got 42 Olympic medals. British cycling is the all-time most most successful British Olympic sport, and we've also won the Tour de France 5 times. And he'll put it down to what he calls this approach of marginal gains. And marginal gains is basically if you take every aspect of how you ride a bike and you would improve each of those elements incrementally, then when you add those incremental elements back up, you would actually have a significant impact on performance. So, and these are some of the examples that they've gone to. So not shaking hands during competition, for example, for the case of spreading disease. Painting the floors white so it's easier to spot contaminants. And even going on tour with their own mattresses and pillows, you know. So all these things have that marginal difference, that marginal gain, you know. So, but what if we took the same approach to the working environment? What if we thought about employees as athletes? What if we were able to break down the components of a workplace experience and improve each of those incrementally? Would that lead to better productivity? Would it lead to a higher performing team? Would it lead to increased profitability? And more importantly, could we measure a return on the investment that we made? So let's look at the theory. So we've got a team of 10 people here. And in that team of 10 people, there's 3 absolute top performers. So traditional approaches would say that we'd take those top 3, we'd invest in them, we'd put them on high-performing programs, and we'd try and improve them even more. But what if we could take the rest of that team, the 7 remaining, and look to help them reach their potential in the workplace? What if we could actually use the working environment to do that? And that's fundamentally the question that we've asked ourselves in looking at our research, which we call Healthy Offices. So this was a piece of research that we conducted last year. And what we did was we took just over 120 people in our office in Amsterdam, and we split the office into 2. So we had one group, which was essentially our control group. So they stayed pretty much as is. And then we had the other group go through a series of healthy changes in the workplace. So we did the study over about 7 months. We partnered with the University of Twente in Amsterdam, and we used a range of different ways of collecting data as we went through the research. So we used observation, we used interview, we used experiments, we used logic and reasoning tests, and we also used technology. So everybody had a Garmin tracker, so we were able to monitor sleep quality and also activity levels in the office as well over the course of the working day. So, and all of that data, anybody who's concerned with data privacy, all of that data went back to the university. So they managed that data for us. So it didn't come back to the employer at all. So that was essentially the research. The other measure we used was the rate of perceived mental effort. So this is a scale of 0 to 150. And every evening, what we asked each employee on both sides, both groups, was to rate how much mental effort it took them to complete their day's work. So 0 is, I'm probably looking for my next job because this isn't challenging me at all. Anything above 90 is when we're moving into a burnout zone. So that's when we're starting to move into criticality, where it's starting to be too stressful. There's too much mental effort being exerted and not enough. It's not a sustainable situation, if you like. So that was a kind of key measure every day over the course of the 7-month study. And these were the features that we actually made changes in. So nothing too sophisticated, relatively standard environmental factors, if you like. So we looked at lighting, and we looked to improve lighting within the workplace. We looked at bringing the outdoors in terms of natural spaces. We looked at nutrition and how we could introduce healthier nutrition. And we looked at mindfulness. We looked at encouraging mindfulness in the office and allowing people to take a break. And we also looked at physical activity. So we encouraged people to be more active in the workplace. And that was, I'll share some of the details of the studies in a second, but that was things like bringing in a cycling meeting room. And we introduced yoga balls to the office as well. So we had a lot of fun with the experiment. So which it had to be because it was 7 months. So we needed people to have fun along the way. So it'd be great to have a little bit of audience participation at this point, and just to ask you guys, so from these factors, what do you feel would have the biggest impact on employee performance in the workplace? So if we'll just take them one at a time, so who thinks lighting? Just raise your hand if you do. Okay, a couple of people, okay. Natural spaces? A few more for natural spaces, okay. Healthy nutrition? Okay, about the same as natural spaces, okay. Mental balance? Yep, clear winner there, I think. And physical activity, physical exercise. A few there as well. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll share some of the headline results before I go in and tell you how we did some of the research. So these are the headline results. So nutrition, by far, had the biggest impact on performance, by far. And the interesting thing here is that the behavioral aspects, so those that are associated with behavior in the workplace, have the biggest impact on performance versus some of what we call the environmental factors, so the lighting, for example, and introducing planting to the workplace. So by far, those human behavior aspects had the biggest impact. One thing I should mention is that as people were going through these changes, we didn't explain the science behind it because it was important that people could effectively, that we could try and replicate behavioral change without, just by changing the environment. So we weren't looking to win hearts and minds here. We weren't looking to educate. We were purely observing the impact on performance linked to changing environmental factors. So firstly, I'll touch on healthy nutrition. And this was an interesting month for us. What we did was focus on 3 areas. So we looked at caffeine, so everybody's favourite, most people's favourite drug of choice when it comes to the office. And we looked at sugar intake, and we also looked at hydration, we looked at water, okay? And it was interesting because if you look at this chart here, right, you can actually see the impact that sugar has on the brain. And it's actually a very similar impact that cocaine has on the brain as well. So it stimulates, it increases your serotonin levels, it increases and raises your dopamine levels, and it makes you feel happier as well, right? But it also creates the impulse for more. And it puts us on what we call the insulin wave. So, you've had some sugar, you're feeling quite good, and then all of a sudden you'll hit that slump, and you'll start to feel tired, and you'll start to yawn a little bit, and you'll start to lose focus and concentration. So what we did to combat that was introduce healthy snacks in the afternoon. So in the afternoon, we put out healthy snacks for people just at that point, about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the day, when people are looking for a sugary snack, looking for a bit more of an energy boost. We put out healthy snacks. And we also encouraged people to drink more water as well. So we put carafes of water with mint sprigs in them, with cucumber in them, made them really attractive, so people were going for those first rather than going straight to the coffee machine. Pretty much everyone we talked to that were involved in the experiment were already drinking more caffeine than the recommended daily dose. They were probably eating more sugar than they should, and they weren't drinking enough water. So over the course of the month, we were able to increase water intake, we were able to decrease sugar intake, and we were able to decrease caffeine intake as well. So and this is one of my favorite experiments that we did actually over the course of the research itself, was that we took 2 groups and we fed one group an unhealthy snack, and it was a cream-filled donut. So they enjoyed that. So they got the donut, and then the other group got a healthy smoothie. So it was a spinach and avocado smoothie, which doesn't taste great, but it's very healthy. So and then we talked to them for about 25 minutes, just to let the food get into their bloodstream. And then what we got them to do was perform a very simple accuracy test. So they have a passage of text, and they have to go through and count off a letter, right? So they have to count how many B's there are on that particular page. And they have a time limit as well, so it's time-bound. And what we found was, so we were measuring accuracy and we were measuring time as well. And, what do you guys think? What do you think the impact would be? So the sugar versus the healthy snack on accuracy and speed. Any guesses? Do you think people that had the sugary snack might get it done quicker, or not as accurate? So what we found was that speed was exactly the same, but there was a 45% difference in accuracy, which is absolutely huge, absolutely huge. So 45%. And when you consider that, most people in the working environment around that afternoon time, in fact, I was walking around trying to find a snack at break there, and there were cakes everywhere, there were croissants, I couldn't find any fruit. So hopefully you guys will stay with me for 40 minutes. But if you consider that people are, in the afternoon having sugary snacks, it's actually having quite a significant impact on your ability to concentrate. It's perhaps you're more likely to make mistakes in the afternoon as well, and you're more likely to have to come back and correct those mistakes as well. So it's having that direct impact on your performance. So that was nutrition. Next, we come on to mindfulness. Oh, bear with me, guys, sorry. And mindfulness is something that's very on trend now. There's a lot of talk about mindfulness, and for the right reasons. Johns Hopkins University in Maryland has been able to prove that mindfulness can actually have as good effect on pain levels and depression as antidepressants. So mindfulness is certainly a very powerful tool, but the challenge in today's working environment, when we're working long hours, we're working in stressful environments, mindfulness can often be like meditating in a house on fire, right? It's going to calm you down, but eventually you're gonna get caught by the flames. So it's a great tool, and what we wanted to do was kind of put that to the test. So again, we did an experiment as part of the research, and what we did was we rotated people through a restful state, a restful experience, and a stressed experience. And what we found is that by far, people who were in a restful or a calm state, a meditative state, performed much, much better in the accuracy tests than somebody in a stressed state. But interestingly, moving from the relaxed state to the stressed state, you almost lost that benefit straight away as soon as you went into that stressed environment. So you might be interested what we did to these poor people to make them stressed out. So we did 2 things. So the first thing was we actually got them to sing in public. So as you'll know, the number one fear for human beings is talking in public. So closely followed by death. But we got these poor guys to sing in public. So and then when they did the accuracy test, we found an 18% difference between mindful and stressed. The second thing we did was very mean. We got them to defend their work and tell us why it was better than their colleagues' work in front of their colleagues. So that was a very stressful situation. And in that case, we actually found a 36% difference going from mindful to stressed. So obviously a big difference there. But I think the key point here is that going from that mindful state, you can be in a very, very good place. You can be feeling relaxed. But as soon as you go back into that stressed environment, that high pressure environment, all the benefits gone. So it's about how mindfulness can help. It's certainly a tool, but it's only part of the solution without addressing the context, if you like, around it. Yeah. So next was physical activity, and as I said, this was a really interesting month, and you'll see there the picture down at the bottom of the exercise cycle at the desk. We also, I'm sure you guys have seen the walking treadmills as well. So we introduced some walking treadmills, which are great for taking calls, but rubbish if you're trying to type. But we had some great fun. We also put yoga balls out. We introduced balance boards. So if you're having a stand-up meeting, you're standing on the balance board, and just helps you focus and concentrate a little bit. And we introduced walking meetings as well. So we encourage people to get outside. And if it was a meeting that was really just a catch-up, you didn't have to take notes. You get outside and you do it as a walk instead of sitting in a meeting room. So, I mean, it was very powerful getting people up and getting them moving. We also did, not on this one, sorry. But what we did as part of this research as well is we actually did a lot of research around other research that we'd done in this area. And there was one particular study that we came across which was focused on females in the workplace. And it looked at the amount of activity. So the simple question was asked, how many times do you get up from your desk on any given day? And that was then tracked, and it was quite a large study. And what was found is that people that sat at their desk most of the day were 70% more likely to have symptoms of depression, or in fact be clinically depressed, than those who got up and moved around a lot more. So there definitely is a correlation, if you like, between activity and movement and feeling good and feeling healthy. So it's great for our bodies, but it's also good for our minds. So more active workplaces where you're up, you're moving, you're connecting with colleagues, you're building networks, you're building communities is actually very good for us as well. It helps us to socialize, it helps us to feel part of that community, which is important too. But it also has a very, very positive impact on team working on our business too. So next up was lighting. And lighting's a very interesting one. I was looking at the lighting actually in this room before you guys came in. And what we found when we did our research was pretty shocking, in that you see that yellow tinge to the light. That's actually anybody with an Apple product, right? When you go to bed, it will switch to that nighttime mode. It will have that yellow glow. And that yellow light is essentially preparing your body for sleep. So that yellow light that you see coming from office lights is essentially telling you to go to sleep. The other thing is it's not hitting the back of your eye because it's light that's coming down, so it's not getting to the back of your eye to the full extent. So it's not telling you it's daytime, you should be awake. So we actually introduced a completely different format of lighting called circadian lighting, which you may have heard. So circadian lighting introduces a blue tinge to the light, which replicates daylight. We also increased the intensity of the light significantly. So the light, it was a much brighter environment for people, which did take a little bit of getting used to. But if we just stuck with that, if we just stuck with the blue lighting, it would have been a too stimulating environment. It would have been extremely stimulating. So what we did was program the lighting. So in the morning, It had more of a yellow hue to replicate the start of the day, the waking up, coming onto the blue curve to replicate daylight. We also moved the lighting down, so we had wall-mounted lighting, we had task lighting at the desk as well, so it hit the back of your eye to tell your body you should be awake, it's daytime. And then at the end of the day, the lighting again changed the color to a more kind of yellow color, so it replicated the end of the day, getting your body ready to finish the day, to go home and finish your work. So that was a really powerful thing to make change. And again, not a significant investment to change, but it did have a really powerful impact on people's ability to concentrate, to be present, to be awake and be alert in the workplace. And finally, outdoor spaces, natural spaces. This was the last feature we looked at. And anybody that goes to the seaside or lives beside the seaside, we go there, we automatically relax. You hear the waves moving. It's a relaxing environment. Natural spaces are the same for us. We're human beings. We're not built to live in concrete boxes. So we perform better when nature's around us. We feel better when nature's around us. The World Health Organization did a piece of research that we looked into when we were doing this, which demonstrated a link between people spending time in forests and positive immune responses around for people with cancer. So, and in this picture here, actually, this is a Dutch hospital, and this is a garden that's put aside for people recovering from chemotherapy sessions. So they've been able to prove that people respond better, they feel better recovering from those sessions, not in a hospital bed in a room, but in a garden space. One of the interesting things we found, though, in our research is that it doesn't even necessarily have to be a real natural space or a real plant. People responded just as positively to murals, to green spaces, to pictures of plants. So we played with different types of environments. We used plants. We also used green murals, but we found that the same benefit in terms of performance, the same benefit around well-being was derived from both scenarios. So coming back to this perceived mental effort scale, these are the results that we got over the course of the study. So as you see, we focused on a different intervention every month. And the line at the bottom there is the control group, and the line at the top is the healthy office group. So what you can see is that over the course, consistently, in fact, on average, over the course of the 7-month study, people who were going through the healthy changes were putting, on average, 10% less mental effort into getting their work done on any given day. So obviously that changes depending on the intervention that we made, but and there's also seasonal impacts here as well. So you can see mental effort get quite intense for people as we're moving into July, and that's really because people just don't want to be inside offices in July because summer's coming, and people want to be outdoors. So it's more difficult to stay in an office and get your work done, and that was consistent, as you can see, across both the groups. But 10% is pretty significant, and what we were able to identify on this one as well was that a lot of people in that control group were pretty much close to burnout, particularly as we come into the summer period there, reaching 90 out of 150. That's when we tend to see signs of people burning out if that happens on a consistent basis. So in terms of key considerations, if you like, or key takeaways, health is obviously here to stay. I think it's clear that as a society, we're investing more in our health, we're more conscious of our health, and we're prioritizing our health as well over work sometimes. So I think we're starting to see that more and more, particularly in Generation Y, who are looking for potentially benefits over other rewards such as money, such as office status. So I think that's certainly one thing. I think the office design needs to be more focused on people, on the human, and really thinking about how we can create environments that help people feel better when they come to work. And you look at this room, this was designed by an architect. all the mechanical and electrical installation was specified by an engineer, but where was the doctor or the medical profession telling us what works and what doesn't work and what makes us feel healthy? So I think making sure we take that much more people-focused approach to designing buildings is going to be important. It's also important that, you know, and I'm sure you guys have these discussions within your own organizations, where does the responsibility for health and well-being sit? You know, is it with HR? Is it with facilities? Is it with corporate real estate? Is it with the business itself? Is it with managers? And I suppose the answer is that it's a holistic response, you know? It needs to be about, yes, the spaces we create, yes, the policies that we put in place and the benefits we provide, but also think about the facility services that we provide, and how we can use the concept of nudge to help people make better, healthier decisions every day when they're in the office. So I think really thinking about that holistic approach, that holistic response to how you enable wellness at work is a really important one. And of course, the final one is data, right? I think if you look at most wellness programs, there's not clear measurable outcomes that can be linked back to a business case. So I think having more data like the data we're creating here, we're not saying that this is the final answer, but this is a starting point, right? And I think if we can start to build on this, start to collect more data, start to show that link between the changes we can make and how people perform, you know, by far, the workforce will be between 80 and 90% of any organization's operating costs, so most of organizations' operating costs. So focusing on how we can help people perform better is obviously it's a good return of investment. We just need to be clear on what that business case is, because if we don't, it's going to continue to be a faith-based investment. So that was my presentation, guys.